I rise to make a contribution on behalf of the Coalition in relation to this Australian Citizenship Amendment, Citizenship Repudiation Bill 2023. This is an important bill. This is a necessary bill. It is a bill which, in principle, the Coalition, of course, supports because it seeks to maintain a power that the Coalition first introduced in office for citizenship of a convicted terrorist to be able to be removed. However, we want to make sure we get this bill right. We want to make sure this bill achieves its objectives, and we are willing to work with the government in a cooperative way to ensure that's the case and ensure the timely passage of this bill. And to that end, after being briefed on this bill earlier this week by the government, the opposition leader, Mr Dutton, has written to the Prime Minister, Mr Albanese, setting out what we see as a series of necessary amendments to improve and strengthen this bill. And if the government is able to agree to these amendments, which we have also circulated in the chamber and should be available now to senators, then that would make it very easy for us to support the swift passage of this bill. Senator Cash is going to move those amendments for the opposition later in this debate when we get to the committee stage, if that's necessary, if the government is not able to move them. And so she will set out in more detail the purpose of those amendments and will speak to those. But in brief, there are two main concerns that we have. One of them we do not seek to deal with in amendments today because it is not straightforward and it needs to be considered. And we are asking the government, without delaying passage of this bill, after this bill is agreed to by the parliament, to still nonetheless send it to the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security so it can review this particular issue. And the issue is that the bill as drafted and as proposed by the government does not adequately deal with the historical terrorism caseload that we have in this country, including our most notorious ever convicted terrorist, Abdul Benbrika. As drafted, and if passed in this form, this bill would not allow the citizenship of a previously convicted terrorist offender who is in jail and, in Benbrika's case, due to be released shortly, to have his citizenship stripped off him because it has no retrospective elements. And so someone like Benbrika, who is rightly convicted and jailed of his crime, who had his citizenship withdrawn, but who was successful in the High Court of repudiating that withdrawal on the basis it was done by a minister and not by a court, will be allowed, after he is released from prison, to continue to be an Australian citizen unless he goes and commits a fresh and new terrorism offence. And we want to make sure that all legal options have been exhausted to test whether or not, in fact, those who have been convicted of historical terrorism offences can have their citizenship withdrawn in a proper and lawful and constitutional manner. And we think an inquiry by the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security is the appropriate and necessary way to investigate that issue. And, of course, when these bills were first introduced in 2015 and amended in 2018, they were subject to extensive consideration and inquiry by the PJCS, and we think there is nothing to prevent the PJCS again doing so, particularly because we are only proposing that the PJCS do so after the bill passed. We do not intend for an inquiry to delay or impede the passage of the bill, but only to consider the bill after it's passed and whether any amendments can be secured to the bill after it's legislated to make sure these historical terrorist offenders like Benbrika are captured. A little bit of history on this bill and why we are dealing with it today. On the 8th of June 2022, the majority of the High Court of Australia invalidated the ability of the Minister for Home Affairs under the Australian Citizenship Act 2007 to determine that a dual national who is engaged in terrorism-related conduct is no longer an Australian citizen. Now, as soon as that decision was handed down, almost 18 months ago, it was clear that legislative reform was necessary. In fact, the government, through the Minister for Home Affairs, Ms O'Neill, in response to that decision in what is known as the Alexander case, initially promised to first legislate to fix this issue more than 12 months ago. In fact, on the 24th of October, Paul Karp in The Guardian reported the government's intention to introduce new legislation to restore these powers before Christmas last year. We are now dealing with this following a second case, in the case of Mr Benbrika, who has also been successful, as Mr Alexander was, in having an element of this bill declared unconstitutional and therefore having his citizenship restored. So it has taken the government 18 months since the first High Court decision to bring on this bill. And apparently it is now an urgent priority that the Parliament must consider this week. As I've said, we don't intend to stand in the way of the passage of this bill. It's an important principle which we support, but we do not understand why this week it has become urgent and why it couldn't have been dealt with a year ago, as the Minister first said that it would be, or why it couldn't have been dealt with a month ago when the Benbrika decision was handed down by the High Court. And as I said, we are concerned that it only deals with future terrorism cases and does not deal with historical cases like Benbrika. This is a man who plotted devastating attacks on Australians, including one targeting the AFL Grand Final at the MCG, and we do not think it is appropriate to fail to address that very serious case. The other thing our amendments seek to do is broaden the range of offences which could be an appropriate trigger for someone's citizenship to be cancelled. Senator Cash will move those amendments. I see they have now been circulated in the chamber, which expand the list of serious offences to include a range of other offences to be captured by this bill, including, for example, advocating terrorism and genocide, advocating violence against Australia's national interest, child sex offences and other serious crimes, because we think in the same way in which the government has recognised that committing an act of terrorism or planning to do one violates the principle of citizenship, in the same way the government has rightly recognised and proposes to add in this bill espionage and foreign interference as a betrayal of Australian citizenship. We also think these other serious crimes constitute that as well. We are concerned that it doesn't capture slavery, it doesn't capture torture, it doesn't capture a carriage service for child abuse material, use of a carriage service involving sexual activity or causing harm to a person under 16, urging violence, advocating terrorism, threats to security including training with a foreign military, offences relating to monitoring devices in the criminal code, harming Australians including the murder of Australians overseas, and many other matters. We think the bill should be amended to capture those so that the government has the widest possible opportunity to cancel the citizenship of one of these people. For example, if Mr Benbrika, upon being released to the community, goes and commits new offences that are not of a terrorist nature, currently, as drafted, there will be no opportunity for a government to apply to the court to have his citizenship removed, and we want to give the government the maximum opportunity to take away a citizenship of a person like that. Currently, as drafted, what the bill is saying is that if you are an Australian citizen but you also hold another citizenship, you go overseas and you murder another Australian citizen, that is not sufficient grounds to cancel your citizenship. If you're a person who engages in torture or who goes overseas to rape children, that is not enough to allow the minister to apply to a court to say we don't think this person should be Australian and their citizenship should be cancelled when they have another citizenship available to them. Under this bill, if you're a person who goes to train with a foreign military, who engages in armed trafficking across borders, who urges violence against Australians, some of the clearest possible repudiations of your allegiance to Australia, as it's drafted, this bill says you will be able to keep your Australian citizenship. This could be remedied. It could be remedied by the amendments that we will move today. It need not be remedied by our amendments if the government agrees to our amendments, and I understand that the Leader of the Opposition and the Prime Minister are in discussions today about whether that can be facilitated. And we are keen to make sure that we can leave the Parliament this week with the strongest possible citizenship stripping bill passed and not any gaps in the bill. Because unfortunately we have learned in the last couple of weeks that when it comes to urgent national security bills introduced by this government, some gaps have arisen. Gaps arose in the original migration amendment bill to impose binding conditions on those people released by the High Court into the community on bridging visas. Initially, we learned that the visa conditions were not binding at all because the only punishment for violating those visa conditions was to be detained pending deportation, and it wasn't lawful in the view of the High Court to do that. Then we learned that the government was introducing some conditions, but many omissions and weaknesses were identified in that bill, including no restrictions on whether someone should go near a school or a childcare centre if they are a convicted child sex offender, including no restrictions on contacting the family of a victim if they were a murderer. And the 6 amendments that we proposed, the government subsequently agreed to, even after they told the media and came into the Parliament that their original bill was as strong as possible. And again, the Parliament is this week considering an urgent patch-up job to that legislation because even that legislation had omissions and flaws in it, including the fact that the government forgot while including these as breaches of a visa condition, to also make it a criminal offence to engage in this behaviour, therefore tying the hands of the Australian Federal Police in enforcing these and making sure that people who breach their visa conditions can actually be locked away. So our experience with this government when it comes to urgent national security legislation is if they are not scrutinised, if amendments are not proposed, then the best possible bill cannot pass this place, and it falls to the opposition to help them to do so. As I said in my opening remarks, we intend to facilitate the passage of this bill this week, but only if the government agrees to strengthen this bill. We do not want to see a weak or inadequate bill pass the parliament. We want to see these issues that we have identified and written to the Prime Minister about addressed by way of amendments, and we're hopeful that the Prime Minister can be sensible and pragmatic and recognise this bill could be improved, and we would welcome his support to do that. As I've also said, we must carefully examine this question of whether the historical terrorism caseload in this country, including Abdul Benbrika, can be captured by this law. Now, we appreciate that there are some complexities involved in doing that, and that's why we are not proposing that amendments seek to deal with that issue today. What we are proposing is instead, after the bill has passed, it then be reviewed to the sent to the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security for a review to examine that question, because we do not think it's acceptable that someone like Benbrika, who plotted to blow up the MCG on Grand Final Day, should be allowed to be freed in the community with his Australian citizenship restored and no restrictions placed upon him. We must have the opportunity to apply to a court for a court to grant the government's request for his citizenship to be removed. I don't think any Australian would think that Mr Benbrika, who's a dual citizen of Algeria and Australia, has upheld the obligations he entered into when he obtained his Australian citizenship to abide by our laws, to support our values. He has very clearly defied those, and if no legal sanction can be applied to him by way of removing his citizenship, then this is a deficient law and it must be fixed. And we're proposing to work in a constructive and bipartisan way with the government to achieve that. We are not willing to allow a rushed bill to be passed that doesn't deal with these very serious inadequacies that we have identified. And my colleague Senator Cash will outline in more detail the amendments that she's prepared to move if the government is not prepared to agree to them.